ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hi, it's PK from your favourite politics podcast, The Party Room. And for our summer episodes, we're speaking to experts about the policy behind the politics, looking at some big election issues like housing and what can actually be done to fix the current crisis. You can find the episodes on the ABC Listen app.
Is there a risk that a fire as destructive and intense as LA has seen could happen in an Australian city? The answer, says the head of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, is yes. Today, Commissioner Rob Rogers, who will leave the service at the end of this fire season, on how US firefighters have responded and why we need to be prepared for a similar urban fire here. I'm Sam Hooley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Rob Rogers, as Australians, of course, we can all really relate in one way or another to the LA fires. And you, I think, more than anyone, given you've had 45 years in the Rural Fire Service, I bet you've been watching this pretty closely.
I have. And I think that some of the things I immediately look at is that you look at the terror in the face of the residents that are there, and the frustration and the tiredness of the firefighters, and I can empathise that they're trying to do everything they possibly can, and the residents are, looking for someone to basically fix all this, and just given the circumstances and what they're going through, it's not that simple.
Well, I think as Australians watch this unfold, they're perhaps thinking, I wonder if we could do a better job of fighting an urban fire like this, and whether or not we could actually see an urban fire like this in Australia. So that's really what I want to unpack with you first of all. Can we start, though, Rob, by just looking at the approach of firefighters in LA, what they've been doing? Because the first fire, it began on the 7th of January, and it really was ferocious from the get-go.
Hellish scenes in the City of Angels. The Pacific Palisades, among Los Angeles' most luxurious postcodes, caught in an inferno.
So what would have been in their minds when this first fire took off in the Palisades?
I think what's important is to context the environment that they were dealing with at that time. So they've been in a drought for, I think, a bit over 12 months. But I've got to say that given how they're in the middle of winter, probably, they weren't probably planning for major fires. I mean, whilst you still do get fires in winter, normally they're a lot easier to extinguish. And look, and occasionally you do get a wind-driven fire that causes you some problems, but not normally to this level. That is certainly something that they wouldn't have been ready for. But then when these fires occurred, I mean, normally from a bushfire point of view, the immediate thing is can we stop this from becoming a major problem fire? And I think that opportunity evaporated very, very quickly because of the strength of the winds that they were dealing with. I think they were up to 160 kilometre-hour winds they were dealing with at some point there.
And the fire grew from 20 acres to more than 200 in 20 minutes, just to put that in perspective.
Yeah, exactly, which does not surprise me at all, given the wind strength and how dry it is because of the drought. So they would have no access to aviation because there's not one fixed wing or helicopter that would be able to fly in that could actually do anything. So they, normally that sort of thing, you rely on aviation as well to try and hold that fire a little bit small until firefighters get there. So you've taken away some of the really, important tools from firefighters. So they're back to being just, firefighters on the ground and seeing the part of the fire that they can just see from where they are. So your situation awareness for these people would be very, very difficult, and they would be dealing with what's in front of them. And what would be in front of them, obviously, is trying to protect properties and people's lives. And so they would have been very much in a house to house, just trying to save what you can type thing. So once that opportunity to contain the fires passed, then it's about protecting as much as you can, because a fire in those circumstances will do whatever it wants. You're not going to put it out. You're not going to change its direction. You've got to let that fire run, and just got to try and protect what's in front of it as best you can until the conditions ease. And then you try and look at, well, okay, now how can I contain that fire?
Yeah, and the problem, of course, was in LA that initial fire, that was one, but then during that same evening, more fires started. So by the next day, there was 7 fires burning and still those terrible conditions.
Yeah.
What an impossible situation to deal with.
Absolutely, because, I think the problem is where all those fires are, it doesn't matter which fire you pick, they're all threatening property. The problem is the conditions eased, I think, marginally, but even the marginal easing was still very strong winds. And I think that, the forecast is for them to get worse again. So it's but that Santa Ana winds is a particular phenomenon that California does get. And obviously, combined with the drought, the speed of that wind makes it very, very difficult to deal with.
From what you've seen, is this how you would organise things, arrange things, the orders that have been put out, the way it's been fought?
Look, it's hard to say, because I guess I don't really know what their strategies are, what they're doing, and I can only see what everybody else can see on the TV. But I think you would find that sort of approach is pretty universal for people. I think the challenge that you have in those sort of circumstances is to make sure that you can get timely enough warnings out to people. And we work very hard and have worked very hard since 2009 and 20 to try and make sure we can improve the speed of getting those warnings out. Back in 2009 and 20, that was very much a human looking at that using fire models, but now we've got an AI system that automatically is looking at all of those fires for us in the background and taking updates of fire maps and looking at what fuels it's in, what the current weather conditions, and it was constantly promoting to us what is the most risky fires for us at the moment that are threatening or will threaten the most properties in the next few hours. And so having that AI system, I think, is a game changer for us. That's a massively powerful tool that I wish we had in 2009 and 20, but we've got it now, and it's the only one of its type in the country. Ultimately, I think what will happen is that you will see ultimately a fire start, and this system will be capable of dispatching a truck to it without any human intervention. It'll come in and it'll automatically dispatch the truck or an aircraft, and that's, to me, that's actually what we should be getting towards.
But hang on, you're saying if you had that AI system in place in 2019, 2020, you could have put out the initial flames?
We would constantly have a list of the highest priority fires, not waiting for us to, someone's noticed something different, someone making a call locally, someone calling up and saying, hey, this is now changed and this fire's here. And so, us is mapping fires, detecting fires, mapping fires, then obviously running models of what those fires could do in that fuel, in those weather conditions. That's what this system will do. It will automatically do those things. So it makes life a lot easier.
Well, Rob, in the 2019-2020 fires, almost 3,000 homes were lost, of course, but that was spread across a really big area. But in a city like LA, the destruction is incredible. Something like 12,000 structures have been lost already. So I just wanted to ask you, do you think we could see that sort of urban fire at that intensity in a city in Australia? Could that actually happen here?
Look, I think the important thing is that there is certainly the capacity for significant fires in somewhere like Sydney. There is so many areas that have significant vegetation national parks, and then through some unfortunately pretty poor planning historically, like we're talking decades ago, we built everything on ridge tops. So, when you look at it from a fire point of view, it's quite a difficult and challenging position for firefighters when you've got all that vegetation in valley systems, and then you've got all the homes and infrastructure you're trying to protect on the top. Because as your listeners would know, that fires travel significantly faster uphill. So you got these fires that go running up the hill really bad, and then firefighters trying to protect them at the top. So the things that I think we've been fairly lucky historically. I mean, if you go back to 1994 was probably, some significant fires, and there were some hundreds of homes that burnt in both northern suburbs and in the south. But, when you start thinking about the potential and the things that we consider in, these multiple fires in the Sydney area, and if you overlay that with the weather and the drought conditions we had in 2019-20, then I'd be absolutely very nervous. I think it's very true that Sydney does have the capacity to have significant fires go through it. Look, I mean, you could get, if you had an very unusual weather event and you got sustained winds during a winter, you could get problem fires in winter like LA has, but we don't have that Santa Ana wind phenomenon, so it'd be a very unusual thing for us to have winds to that strength for that long. We can certainly get bad days in summer and consecutive bad days in summer. So yeah, absolutely.
Tell me, how important is the global sharing of aircraft now? Because that's becoming tricky. As you say, the LA fires have occurred in winter. There's this overlapping fire season happening at the moment. So what's going to happen with that? And if that breaks down, what difficulties does that bring up for Australia?
Look, and it's a good question. And look, and luckily there's a review currently into aerial firefighting with large air tankers and the big heavy helicopters. Now, we're lucky in New South Wales. We've purchased our own large air tanker, which lives here, and we've also purchased our own heavy helicopter along with some rescue helicopters. So we're in a pretty good shape as a state, but we're the only one that has done that. So the federal government's leading a review, but in conjunction with states and territories, that's going to be looking at what's the next decade looking like with those overlapping fire seasons. What's that going to mean to contracts? Because majority of those heavy helicopters and large air tankers are then on contract. So I think it's looking and saying, well, how's that going to look for the future? And it is a problem, and that's where I think Australia, because we are so far from other countries, we've got to get to a point where there's a level of self-sufficiency on those larger machines.
Well, Rob, as you prepare to finish your career, can you give us an honest assessment about what you expect to see when it comes to fires in Australia in the years ahead? What should we really be preparing for? Because all assessments really are that with climate change, it's not good.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, one of the things that we've seen even before the 2019-20 fire season, the Bureau of Meteorology did some work for us looking at historically fire seasons in New South Wales. And obviously that's where I'm talking from at the moment, but I'm sure you could use the same circumstances right around the country. And what we found was, part of New South Wales, the fire seasons in the last 60 years has extended by 100 days. So it's not something that's just been happening. It's actually been happening for some time. Agencies like ours need to keep evolving. We need to keep using technology, and as technology advances, try and make sure that we capitalise on that. But of course, we can't lose sight of the fact that whilst we'll use technology, and we should, at the end of the day, it's about people on fire trucks that actually make a difference. And in fire in the largest case, it's volunteers. We have to think about, how do we preserve that? How do we make sure that in 10 years' time that we've got a new generation of people that are prepared to put their lives on hold and indeed risk their lives to save others for nothing more than a thanks.
Rob Rogers is the Commissioner of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. He will retire this year. This episode was produced by Cara Jensen McKinnon and Sydney Peed. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.